Dancing Star Foundation and Earth Service welcome you to a lively discussion on the state of the Earth. I'm co-host Peter Kreitler.
And I'm Alexandra Paul. Today's panel is Ingrid Newkirk, Rod Nash, John Hart, Paul Ehrlich, Frances Moore-Lepay, and Bob Gillespie. Thank you so much for being here and welcome. Today's show is about the state of the Earth, the ecological crisis. So we'll be discussing this in a no-holds-barred, very candid manner. And it's also very important that we talk about what are we going to do. So not only are we going to discuss the problems, we're going to try and get to solutions.
Alexandra, I have here with me 2 copies of Time magazine, one from 1989 that says Planet of the Year, Endangered Earth. And then in 2002, How to Save the Earth, with the byline, the hot and wild weather is a sign of things to come. In addition, polluted seas, we're moving towards 7 billion in population. What is the state of the Earth? What are we going to do?
So Time magazine's been talking about the ecological crisis for 20 years, but we know that you all have been talking about it for even longer. So let's discuss, have we reached the point of no return in terms of the state of our planet? And what does it look like from each of your perspectives? Where are we today?
The big issue in the scientific community is we've gone too far. In other words, the Time has been talking about it for 20 years, but we've been essentially doing nothing about it for 20 years. We're not doing anything significant on climate change. We're not doing anything really significant, for instance, on the population problem in the United States. And so while other people are wondering whether climate change is a hoax, the scientists are talking about, is it too late to do anything?
And even the people who believe climate change is an issue, we're not doing enough? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the amount of greenhouse gases is going up, not down.
John, would you like to comment on that?
Over the 4 decades I've been studying these issues, each decade looks more hopeless and dire than the one before. Nevertheless, I think we're not over the edge. It's not too late, but it's going to take an enormous effort on the part of the world to deal with these issues. They're huge, but if we don't deal with it rather quickly in the next few years, it's going to be too late.
But John, I've been hearing that I heard that in the early 90s, 88, someone saying we had to deal with it in the next few years, that we'd be in trouble. It's like human nature, we keep just pushing it a few more years, that's when the tipping point is going to be.
We can point to indicator after indicator showing that the problem in this decade is much worse.
What are some of the indicators that it is pretty dire at this point?
One indicator, just look at the rate at which polar ice is melting over the last 30 years. The decline in summer ice, habitat for polar bears, has been shrinking, shrinking, shrinking. Look at wildfires in the West. Expanding, expanding, expanding. Every indicator we look at that relates to climate or biodiversity or toxics in the environment looks worse in each subsequent decade.
For animals it's over, at least for wild animals. The time has passed. We can do all these piecemeal things, but as you fly over the country, you see how we've just destroyed all natural habitat, almost without exception. There are very few little Switzerlands in the United States, for example. And when people talk about flooding and the devastation caused by construction and deforestation, I think we have to remember that's the animals' homes. So it's not all about human beings, it's also about what we've done to all the other species on the face of the earth. And for them, it's too late. We have no patience with trying to argue for their survival or accommodate their survival. For them, the clock is ticking.
Even though most people don't understand that there are life support systems, that when they disappear, we disappear too.
Yes, indeed.
So you're saying that when the wild animals disappear, then that is an indicator. So it's over for us too, is what you're getting to, Ingrid.
Yes, indeed. I think that we are all tied together, the interconnectedness of life, the great orchestra, and all one wishes to call it. But of course, for me, a great sorrow is that it's over for them. You know, to some extent, we will follow in their tracks, but it's because we're in charge. We've messed it up for them. And now they are leading us down the path that we have created.
You mentioned one of the species being polar bears. Are there other species that are indicator species that are in trouble? What is the canary in the coal mine
Well, many
today?
of the pollinators upon which we're utterly dependent for a lot of our food are in trouble, including
fish,
even the honeybee.
The fish in the sea that we eat. The
Some of
species
us
are
eat.
declining in numbers. What?
So that some of us eat.
Yeah.
Some of us eat.
So that you're saying the fish in the sea are...
Declines in numbers of species is partly overfishing. It may also have to do with changes in ocean currents and ocean temperatures. The projections are that we're going to see the loss of our coral reefs, which support huge diversity of life.
Why is that happening, John?
When the temperatures of the ocean get above about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, corals bleach out, the coral reef dies.
And as the seas get more acid,
and then
from
acidity.
CO2,
That's the warming is the short-term problem. We're already starting to see it, and in the next decade or two, it will be worse. Over 3 or 4 decades, ocean acidification is going to take care of what warming didn't wipe out on its own.
Wow.
I believe George Perkins Marsh was writing about these same things over 100 years ago in 1864, and Paul Ehrlich was writing about them in 1968. And,
but Rod
we're
just
still here.
illustrated a very important point,
Yeah.
and that is a long history of exponential growth in no way implies a long future.
Yeah.
of exponential
That's
Rod,
right.
what was the population, the human population, when you were born?
Well, I'm guessing, I'm thinking it might have been about 3 billion.
No, actually it was 2
2
billion.
billion. 2 billion.
Yeah.
It's about 200
more than
million
threefold
at the time of
increase.
Christ. 200, 300 million. I learned from you at the time of Christ, 300 million.
But look what we've
And
added.
2 billion
I
right
mean,
before you were born, 3 billion when we started our careers.
Okay, but what I'm
It's
trying
gonna
to
be
say,
10 billion within the near future.
what I'm trying to say
That's 5
is it
times.
possible that in a small valley in France there were the
Highly
and
unlikely, because
but
they
look
can
what
just
we've-
we've got a
move away.
problem.
But
We've
look
got
what
a
we're
problem.
They
moving
weren't all
from.
driving automobiles and consuming at the level
They
we
had
do.
frontiers to expand into
Exactly.
in terms of living
There's
space.
almost nothing left. It's all pollution. The waterways are polluted, the air is polluted. There's nowhere to go. I mean, we can continue to expand. We're so greedy in our needs now that I think that we've come to the edge of that margin that Cro-Magnon man didn't have. The margin was almost limitless.
What you can say with absolute assurance from what we know about human evolution is that none of our ancestors took a long view. There was no point. If the climate was changing on Australopithecus, it could mutate or migrate. There was nothing. It wasn't causing the change. It couldn't respond to the change. And so we can be virtually certain the Cro-Magnons may have said, yeah, there's not much game this year. Let's go into the next valley or something like that. But they wouldn't have been talking about what's going to happen to their descendants in 3 generations. Just look at the history. We built, as a species, we built cathedrals that were worked on for hundreds of years because people thought the world was just going to be the same in the future. The whole idea of future thinking is really new in terms of evolutionary time.
Francis, what do you think?
Well, I think that the question of is it too late? I certainly agree with, I mean, how can anyone not agree with these measures of devastation that are so much in our face right now? But for me, the critical question is whether it's too late for us to learn and be able to come together in what is now missing in what I like to think of as an ecology of democracy, where we believe in ourselves that we have the capacity to actually come together. And what's so different now is how much more we know about both human nature and the nature of nature itself, and together create a more livable world than we have had. Because right now, we don't have to wait till another generation. Right now, for most people on Earth, life is extremely difficult. And so this is the question: can we learn? And we are a learning species. And my sense is that we are trapped into a way of thinking, that we are creatures of the mind, and our dominant definition of the problem is actually continuing the crises. So the question is,
Which is how? How are we continuing the crises?
Well, my premise is that we have been taught this view of ourselves and life on Earth as fundamentally one of lack. There's not enough. There's not enough goodness in us, and there's not enough goods out there. And so we have to be in this competitive struggle and focus like everything on production, more. It is very much a mechanical worldview that leads us actually into creating scarcity out of plenty. And this was my first aha. You know, when I wrote Diet for a Small Planet, I said, oh, there are all these people saying the Earth has run out of food. And then I realized as a 26-year-old that we were actually creating scarcity out of plenty, because today only about half of grain goes to feed people, and the rest is very much diminished by feeding it to livestock and industrial uses. So my point is that it's not too late for us to learn and to come together and to make this transition one in which we can create a more livable world.
I agree. A huge chunk of the scientific community has come to the conclusion that we know more than enough of the science to know what to do. For example, a good example is the wastage of grain. We know about that. The issue is, how do we change human behavior? How do we get together to operate? And the reason I'm pessimistic and started out pessimistic is I don't see any trend towards that change.
But
in other words, we could do the right things, but we don't show the slightest sign.
And I would imagine that all of us know this, but only a few of us on this panel don't eat meat. I mean, that's the bottom line. So we are the perfect examples of people who know the problem, but don't necessarily.
But Alexandra, I think that's part of it, is that the majority of people, human beings on the face of the planet, have no say-so at all. They are just eking out an existence every day. They're lucky if they get a few pulses or a piece of bread. And we're so locked away in our ivory towers in the West, I think. Our politicians are so out of touch. It's absolutely painful. I picked this up out of the New Yorker, and I have to share this with you. It's just phenomenal. At the time it was written, which is December of 2010, we're talking about Darrell Issa, who is the ranking minority member of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. I see recognition there. He said, I don't want to use it to have corporate America live in fear, the new powers I'll be getting. Instead, I want to investigate the climate scientists. And then you have John Boehner of Ohio, who's the incoming House Speaker at that time, who says the idea that carbon dioxide is a carcinogen that's harmful to our environment is almost comical. And these are our politicians. Yeah. And the third one is the chairman of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, and he said, this is John Shimkus of Illinois, he says, the dangers of climate change can be dismissed by quoting Genesis 8:22. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. That's the infallible word of God and the way it's going to be. So these are the movers and shakers in the Western world, in arguably the most powerful country on the face of the planet. And if we have to contend with that, what does it mean for the poor individual who's grubbing a living, and what does it mean for all the other species on the face of the earth?
But why? Why have we gotten to a country ruled by a government that is so out of touch with reality and with people's sentiments? I mean, the question I ask, why are we creating a world that very few of us would ever choose as individuals? Why are we together creating a world? Why do people with that mentality rise to power? And my hypothesis is because we so lack confidence in ourselves, we feel that we must turn over our fate to, in our case, certainly in the United States, to an automatic force, the magic of the market, as Ronald Reagan called it, that concentrates and concentrates wealth, and then we allow that concentrated wealth to infuse government. And we have what Roosevelt called in 1938. He said, the liberty of democracy is not safe if a people tolerate the growth of private power
You're talking
to the
about
point that is
revolution.
stronger than the democratic state itself.
We
We're
love
too
to complain
comfortable.
about politicians, but the bottom line is we're pretty comfortable
We're
here.
too comfortable.
That's why there's no revolution,
The people
because
with
it's
the
not bad
power are
enough.
comfortable. There are a lot of people
People are
without power who
uncomfortable.
are very uncomfortable.
But why do we give our power to those people and not to
We don't have
people
many
with more
options.
common sense?
I'm going to have us pause here for a second.